They thought he was just a janitor, an invisible man. But when bullies targeted his daughter, this quiet dad revealed a hidden strength that silenced the entire school. What they learned about respect changed everything. David Miller wasn't just a janitor. He was a father whose heart ached the moment he witnessed his precious daughter, Chloe, being tormented by the school's meanest bullies. Could this truly be happening? No one, absolutely no one, could have predicted the powerful storm about to break. If your heart resonates with this, where are you watching from? The very air in the school corridors usually hung heavy with the scent of disinfectant and forgotten lessons. David moved with a quiet grace, his mop a familiar extension of his hand, tracing a steady rhythm across the scarred linoleum. His joints, especially that persistent ache in his left knee on chilly mornings, might protest, but they could never halt his purpose. Every deliberate sweep of his mop, every careful movement was a testament to his unwavering precision. His work uniform, though well-worn, was always spotless, the name David stitched neatly over his chest. His boots, scuffed at the heels, gleamed with polish. The student, they barely noticed him. He was as much a fixture as the lockers, the overhead lights, or that familiar creak in the third step near the science labs. But today, everything felt different. Chloe, David's 16-year-old daughter, had only just joined the school 2 weeks prior. She was a quiet soul, small in stature, with wide, serious eyes. Her braids were always pulled back, her head often bowed as if trying to shrink away from the world. Her mother had always whispered that Chloe held a quiet fire within her. David saw it too, but the world, it seemed, was still blind. She clutched her sketchbook to her chest as she walked the halls, a silent shield. He could sense her nervousness. She'd always glance his way when she passed, a quick, subtle flicker of her gaze, never obvious, and he would always return a small, reassuring nod. "I'm here, my sweet girl." The torment began last Friday. A trio of boys had started to shadow her between classes, their whispers and snickers echoing in the busy hallways. Once, one of them even snatched her bag, cruelly tossing it down the stairs. Chloe never spoke a word about it, but David had seen it all. He had approached Principal Hayes, gently asking him to keep an eye on things. The principal had merely offered a bland smile and a dismissive, "We'll have a word with the boys." But nothing, absolutely nothing, changed. This morning, David arrived even earlier than usual. He silently fixed a broken stall hinge on the third floor, scrubbed away a hateful piece of graffiti from a locker, then positioned himself by the corridor where Chloe would pass between second and third period. The bell shrieked, and students surged into the hall like a torrent bursting from a dam, a cacophony of laughter, squeaking sneakers and slamming lockers. Then his gaze locked onto them. The boys, Chad, Brett, and Kyle. They were already lounging by the lockers. Wait, David's grip on his mop tightened just slightly, but he remained still. Not yet. Chloe rounded the corner, her beloved sketchbook held tightly. She wore her usual faded denim jacket, head down, moving swiftly. Chad, the first of the bullies, suddenly stuck out his foot. Chloe stumbled, falling hard, her precious drawings scattering across the floor like autumn leaves. Brett roared with laughter, clapping his hands. "Oops, must have been gravity." Chloe scrambled, her face burning with shame, trying desperately to gather her art. Then Kyle, the largest of the three, stepped closer. "Isn't your daddy the janitor, kid? Guess cleaning up messes runs in the family, huh?" He snatched one of her sketches, holding it high above her reach. Chloe slowly rose, attempting to remain calm, reaching for her drawing. Kyle shoved her shoulder, sending her reeling back against the cold, hard lockers. That was it. David gently, almost reverently, set his mop down. Then he took his first deliberate step forward. The hallway's clamor didn't cease. It simply seemed to distort, to bend around him. Some students froze, others slowed their pace. A few even pulled out their phones, drawn like moths to the inevitable confrontation. But no one, absolutely no one, stepped in to help. David advanced, each footfall quiet, measured. His arms hung loosely by his sides, not rigid with tension, but poised, ready. Deep within him, something profound shifted. Not rage, not fear, just a perfect alignment, like an ancient key turning smoothly in a familiar lock. Chad still dangled Chloe's drawing, taunting her. She kept reaching, her voice trembling. Please just give it back, he sneered. Going to cry, little janitor girl. Why don't you just clean the floor with your tears? David was now just 10 feet away. His voice, calm and steady, cut through the noise. That's enough. All three boys spun around. Brett blinked. Oh look, Superdad brought his mop. David offered no reply. His gaze was fixed on Chloe, who stood rigid against the lockers, a red mark blooming on her cheek where she'd hit the metal. Are you all right, sweetie? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. She managed a faint nod. Kyle snorted. Man, this isn't your business. David's eyes, devoid of anger but brimming with something ancient and cold, turned to Kyle. It was as if a steel vault had just creaked open behind them. Chad puffed out his chest. You think you can talk to us like that? Just 'cause you clean up puke? He took a step forward. A colossal mistake. He reached for David's shoulder. It all happened in a blur, in just 3 seconds. David's left hand locked around Chad's wrist. His right hand twisted, guiding the boy's elbow downward at an angle that effortlessly dropped him to one knee. There was no roughness, no violence, just a chilling, precise correctness. Then he released him. Chad gasped, scrambling backward, clutching his arm in shock. The entire hallway fell silent. Brett blinked, his jaw slack. What the? He lunged. David sidestepped, one hand on the back of Brett's neck, the other sweeping his leg. Brett hit the floor with a sickening thud, the air whooshing from his lungs in a wheeze. Kyle, the third boy, took a step, then froze, raising his hands in surrender. Whoa, man, we were just messing around. David remained motionless. Apologize, he commanded. Apologize for what now? Kyle stammered, glancing at the phones recording them, at the sea of silent students. Chloe hadn't moved. She was staring at her father as if seeing him for the very first time. I'm sorry, Kyle muttered, barely audible. I didn't mean to. Louder, David insisted. I'm sorry, Kyle repeated, his voice cracking this time. David walked past him, knelt, and with quiet precision, began to gather Chloe's scattered sketches. His hands moved gently, brushing dust from each page. Before stacking them neatly, he handed them to her. Are these yours? She nodded, her eyes wide with wonder. Good work, he whispered, a hint of pride in his voice. A teacher burst through the crowd. What in the world is going on here? Who? She stopped dead when she saw David standing over the humbled boys. Mr. Miller, what did you? Handled it, he stated simply. Principal Hayes was immediately summoned. In the front office, the air practically crackled with tension. You cannot lay hands on students, Mr. Miller, the principal declared, attempting to sound stern. I understand you were trying to help, but this is a lawsuit waiting to happen. David didn't argue. He calmly reached into his pocket, pulled out a USB stick and handed it over. What is this? Principal Hayes asked, bewildered. Security footage, David replied. I personally fixed the West Wing cameras last month, just in case. The principal hesitated, his face paling. You recorded? David's voice remained soft, yet firm. You chose to ignore my first warning. The second time I came prepared. Later that same day, all three boys were summoned to stand before their class. News of the incident had already spread like wildfire through student phones. Everyone knew. One by one, they offered their apologies to Chloe, to David, and to the entire class. David stood at the back, arms crossed, not smiling, simply present. Then, at the principal's insistence, he spoke a few words. Respect isn't about power, he began, his voice resonating with quiet authority. It's not about fear, and it's certainly not about titles. It's about recognizing the inherent value in every single person, even if their hands are dirty, or their shoes are old, or their name isn't emblazoned on a fancy door. He looked at each boy, his gaze unwavering. You don't earn respect by demanding it. You earn it by showing it. A profound silence fell upon the room. Then, slowly, students began to clap. It wasn't a cheer, not a burst of applause, but a long, thoughtful moment of acknowledgement. The next morning, the hallways hummed with a different energy. Not boisterous laughter or teasing, but quiet murmurs. Did you see what happened? Yo, the janitors, like ex-military or something. He didn't even hit them. He just folded them up like chairs. Students now looked at David differently. Not with fear, not exactly, but with a newfound respect and acute awareness. He was no longer just part of the background. He was seen. Even the teachers noticed. One offered a respectful nod in the lounge. Another handed him a coffee, a rare gesture, and simply said, "That was truly impressive." David merely raised an eyebrow, said nothing, and continued his work. Chloe, for the first time since transferring, walked into her first period class with her shoulders back. Her head held high. She even answered a question out loud. Her voice cracked slightly, but it held, strong and clear. At lunch, one of the girls who used to whisper when Chloe passed actually sat down next to her and said, "Your art is honestly so cool." David watched silently from the back door, a quiet sense of triumph blooming in his chest. That afternoon, as he was fixing a rattling ceiling tile in the chemistry wing, Chad, the very boy who had stolen Chloe's sketchbook, approached him, hands shoved deep in his pockets, staring at the floor. David didn't turn immediately. "I just wanted to say sorry again," Chad mumbled. David tightened a screw overhead. "She's not like other girls. She's real quiet, I thought." He trailed off, searching for words. David finally turned, wiping his hands with a rag. "Let me ask you something," he said quietly. "Have you ever truly been punched?" Chad blinked. "What?" "Not a cheap shot," David clarified. "Not a schoolyard scuffle. I mean really punched by someone trained." Chad slowly shook his head. "Good," David stated, "because I was trained not to end things before they ever truly begin. To understand the fundamental difference between raw strength and senseless violence. You were incredibly lucky yesterday." Chad swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on David. "You will carry the weight of who you are," David continued, his voice unwavering. "Whether you choose to build people up or break them down, that, son, is your choice to make." Chad gave a shaky nod and slowly walked away. Later, as David mopped the auditorium stairs, Principal Hayes approached him again, but this time his tone was completely different. "Mr. Miller, I had no idea you were a veteran." David offered no reply. "I just wanted to say thank you," the principal continued, his voice sincere. "Not just for yesterday, but for simply being here." David paused, his gaze drifting down the hall where he saw Chloe, actually laughing with another student. He nodded once, a faint smile touching his lips. "It's why I took this job." The principal hesitated, then offered, "Would you be willing to perhaps lead an after-school session? Self-defense, maybe? Or—" David's small smile grew just a fraction. "Let's start with respect," he suggested. The following week unfolded like a quiet redemption. Students now nodded respectfully as David passed. A few even said, "Sir." One went so far as to hold the door open for him as he pushed his cleaning cart through. Chloe no longer walked with her head bowed low. She smiled more, drew more, and spoke up with confidence in class. One afternoon, as David was fixing a loose locker hinge, a small hand appeared beside him, holding the exact wrench he'd been searching for. He looked up. It was Kyle, the quietest of the bullies. David took the tool without a single word, but the look in his eyes said everything. That evening, as a final bell rang and the halls emptied, Chloe ran up to him, throwing her arms around him and holding him tight. For the first time in what felt like years, David allowed himself to fully exhale, a deep, cleansing breath. They had truly seen him now. Not just the uniform, not just the mop, but the man beneath it all. And from that day forward, the school, and everyone in it, would never look at him the same way again.